Okay, folks, I want to tell you about something that's happening right now that should terrify anyone who cares about constitutional government. Donald Trump, the only president ever impeached twice, acquitted twice by a Republican Senate despite overwhelming evidence, is back in office. And he's operating like someone who learned the wrong lesson from those impeachments. He learned that there are no consequences, that he's untouchable, that the impeachment clause is just another piece of parchment he can ignore. But here's what makes this moment so chilling. He's not just ignoring political norms anymore. He's defying actual court orders. He's refusing to comply with judicial rulings. And he's doing it systematically, strategically, as a test of whether anyone, courts, Congress, the American people, will actually stop him. Let me set the scene. The impeachment clause, Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution says, "The President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors." High crimes and misdemeanors. That's the standard. And what we've seen in 2025 is a president systematically committing what many constitutional scholars argue are exactly those offenses: refusing to comply with court orders, usurping Congress's appropriations power, violating constitutional rights, the very definition of high crimes against the constitutional order. In May 2025, Democratic Representatives Sri Thanetter and Al Green submitted articles of impeachment against Trump. Thanetter brought forward 7 articles arguing Trump has committed obstruction of justice, bribery, and corruption. Al Green submitted House Resolution 415 with his own articles. But here's the thing that makes this different from the first 2 impeachments. This time, Republicans control both the House and the Senate. As Dr. Mina Bose noted, with the Republican-controlled House and Senate, articles of impeachment are unlikely to move forward. Trump knows this. He knows he's politically untouchable, so he's pushing boundaries like never before. And 30 seconds after he realized he was untouchable, the consequences started piling up. Not for him, for the constitutional system itself. Let me give you the most stark example. In February 2025, a federal judge in Rhode Island found that the Trump administration had violated his order, halting a sweeping federal funding freeze. U.S. District Judge John J. McConnell said the government had not restored funding despite his January 31st order, and ordered them to immediately restore frozen funding. This was the first time in Trump's second term that a federal judge accused his administration of defying a court order. The first time. And it was only February, 1 month into his presidency. Judge McConnell wrote, "The broad, categorical, and sweeping freeze of federal funds is, as the court found, likely unconstitutional and has caused and continues to cause irreparable harm to a vast portion of this country." Irreparable harm to a vast portion of the country. Because Trump decided his authority to review programs trumped, no pun intended, court orders and congressional appropriations. But that was just the beginning. In March 2025, Trump's White House defied a judge's order halting deportations of alleged Venezuelan gang members. U.S. District Judge James Boasberg ordered the administration to halt deportations and turn planes around midair. The administration kept the planes going, with officials later admitting they wanted people on the ground first, before a judge could get the case. Read that again. They wanted people deported before a judge could stop them. That's not following the law. That's not appealing an order you disagree with. That's deliberately racing to defy judicial authority before it can be exercised. Then there's the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was deported to El Salvador and sent to a notorious gang prison. The Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that the administration must facilitate his return. The administration slow-walked compliance, with legal scholars noting they appeared to be, at the very least, slow-walking their response to repeated judicial orders. 9-0, a unanimous Supreme Court, and Trump's administration still dragged its feet, looked for loopholes, tried to avoid compliance. And here's the terrifying statistic. An analysis by the Washington Post of 160 lawsuits found that the Trump administration has taken actions to defy 1 out of every 3 judicial rulings against the president's actions. 1 in 3. The analysis found widespread non-compliance with America's legal system. 1 out of every 3 court orders. Ignored, defied, slow-walked, circumvented. This is where the impeachment clause should come in, folks, because refusing to comply with court orders, systematically undermining judicial authority, that's exactly what high crimes and misdemeanors means. It means offenses against the constitutional system itself. It means abusing executive power to undermine the other branches of government. Free Speech for People, a legal advocacy group, has documented multiple grounds for impeachment since Inauguration Day, including refusing to release $2 billion in foreign aid in defiance of multiple court orders, refusing to adhere to court orders prohibiting the Office of Management and Budget from implementing a freeze on federal assistance, and refusing to comply with a court order requiring testimony in lawsuits. These aren't political disagreements. These aren't policy disputes. These are deliberate refusals to follow court orders, the bedrock of our legal system. Legal Director Courtney Hostetler said, "Trump has usurped the powers of the legislature and now tramples on the authority of the judiciary. In just 1 month, he has repeatedly ignored court rulings." 1 month, repeatedly ignored court rulings. Now here's where it gets even more disturbing. Trump stood before reporters and said, "I always abide by the courts, always abide by them and will appeal." But a comprehensive analysis shows dozens of examples of defiance, delay, and dishonesty, posing what experts call an unprecedented threat to the U.S. legal system. Despite Trump's claim to always abide by courts, his administration refuses to comply with approximately 1/3 of court orders made against them. He says he abides by courts. His administration defies 1 in 3 court orders. That's not a contradiction. That's a lie. A systematic, deliberate lie. And Vice President J.D. Vance, he posted on social media, suggesting that judges don't have the ability to challenge Trump's legitimate power. He's openly questioning judicial authority. Law professors who spoke to NPR saw warning signs of a constitutional crisis based on Vance's comments. Blake Emerson, a UCLA law professor, said Vance's post seems to indicate a tangible threat, suggesting the administration believes judges cannot check presidential power. This is the moment, folks. This is when a president tests whether the impeachment clause, the Constitution's remedy for executive abuse, still means anything. Trump has been impeached twice and acquitted twice. He learned that Republicans will protect him no matter what he does. So now he's defying courts, knowing that impeachment won't save us this time. And the consequences? They're not falling on Trump. They're falling on the constitutional order itself. On the principle that courts can check presidents. On the idea that no one is above the law. 30 seconds after Trump realized he was untouchable through impeachment, he started systematically testing every other constraint on his power. And one by one, he's discovering the guardrails are weaker than we thought. Let me tell you what Trump learned from his 2 impeachments. Because understanding that is crucial to understanding what we're seeing now in 2025. Trump was impeached twice, once in December 2019 for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress regarding Ukraine, and again in January 2021 for incitement of insurrection after the January 6 Capitol attack. He's the only U.S. president and only federal official to be impeached twice. In both cases, the Senate acquitted him, largely along party lines. The second impeachment is particularly instructive. The House impeachment managers argued that Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 election results, including his false claims of fraud and efforts to pressure Georgia officials, combined with inciting the Capitol attack, made him a clear danger. When asked what Trump did to stop the violence on January 6, House Manager Stacey Plaskett stated, "The answer is nothing. Nothing. The President of the United States watched his supporters attack the Capitol and did nothing. For hours. And the Senate still acquitted him, with only 7 Republicans voting to convict." Trump's legal team argued the second impeachment trial shouldn't proceed because he was no longer in office. His lawyer Bruce Castor said Democrats were afraid of facing Trump in 2024, and fellow attorney David Schoen claimed it was a chance by a group of partisan politicians seeking to eliminate Donald Trump from the American political scene. And it worked. The Senate voted 57-43 to convict, far short of the 67 votes needed, 10 votes short, which meant Trump could run again in 2024 and win. Here's what he learned. The impeachment clause only works if senators are willing to put country over party, and Republicans proved twice that they're not. They'll protect Trump no matter what he does. Abuse of power? Acquitted. Inciting insurrection? Acquitted. Trying to overturn an election? Acquitted. So when Trump came back to office in January 2025, he knew impeachment is off the table. Republicans control Congress. They're not going to impeach him, and they're certainly not going to convict him. He's functionally immune from political accountability. And that's when the real danger began. Legal experts describe Trump's current approach as legalistic noncompliance, using legal language and procedures to mask defiance of court orders happening behind closed doors. This enables the president to claim he's complying when his administration is actually pushing boundaries and eroding constitutional checks one slice of the salami at a time. One slice at a time. That's the strategy. Don't openly defy every court order at once. That would be too obvious. Instead, pick your battles. Defy some orders completely. Slow walk others. Claim you're complying while finding loopholes. And always appeal to your base that judges are partisan, that courts are biased, that you're being persecuted. The Brennan Center explains that courts have tools to enforce compliance: civil contempt with fines that accrue daily until orders are followed, criminal contempt to punish disobedience, writs of mandamus compelling officials to perform duties, and even potential arrest of officials who defy orders. But here's the problem. All of these enforcement mechanisms take time. Courts are slow, they're deliberative. They want to give parties chances to comply. They're reluctant to escalate to contempt citations against a president. And Trump's administration is taking advantage of that. The analysis found that the administration seems to be taking advantage of the fact that the judicial system is slow to consider, begin, or follow through on contempt proceedings, meaning that their non-compliance often goes unpunished. Indeed, none of the judges whose orders have been ignored have tried to force compliance in the form of punitive orders. None. Not one judge has held Trump in contempt. Despite 1/3 of court orders being defied. Despite systematic non-compliance. Despite open statements from administration officials questioning judicial authority.
Why?
Because judges understand that holding a president in contempt is an extraordinary step. It creates a constitutional crisis. It requires the U.S. Marshals, who work for the Justice Department, which works for the president, to enforce contempt orders against the president's own administration. Harvard Law professor Nancy Gertner explained, if Trump wanted to fully not comply, he could direct the Department of Justice not to comply. At that point, you have a full-on constitutional crisis. That's the checkmate scenario, folks. Courts order compliance. Marshals enforce court orders. But marshals work for Trump. So if Trump tells them not to enforce orders against his administration, who stops him? This is exactly what impeachment is supposed to prevent. The framers created impeachment because they knew you couldn't rely on courts alone to check a lawless president. If a president systematically defies judicial authority, Congress is supposed to remove him. That's the constitutional remedy. But Trump knows Congress won't act. He's watched them protect him through 2 impeachments, through January 6th, through attempts to overturn an election. He knows Republicans will always find excuses. It's political persecution. Democrats just hate him. The timing is wrong. Let the voters decide. So he's exploiting that knowledge. He's pushing every boundary, testing every limit, defying courts because he knows the political check of impeachment is broken. The current articles of impeachment introduced by Democrats cite multiple grounds: usurping the appropriations power by freezing congressionally approved funds, abuse of trade powers, violation of First Amendment rights, and other high crimes. They argue Trump has demonstrated that he is unfit to govern a nation by and for the people, has acted in a manner grossly incompatible with self-governance and the rule of law, and will remain a threat to the Constitution if allowed to remain in office. Will remain a threat. That's the key phrase. Because this isn't about one court order, one defiance, one violation. It's about a pattern, a systematic strategy of undermining judicial authority and congressional power, because Trump knows impeachment can't touch him anymore. Legal scholars at Lawfare have identified what they call the appellate void strategy. Trump deliberately doesn't appeal district court orders he's defying, which means the case can't reach the Supreme Court, which means district judges are on their own trying to force compliance without Supreme Court backing. Think about how clever and cynical this is. Normally, if you lose in district court, you appeal to the circuit court, then maybe to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's authority is unquestionable. Even Trump respects it sometimes. But if Trump just ignores the district court order without appealing, the case stays at the district court level. The plaintiffs can't appeal because they won, and the district judge is left trying to force a sitting president to comply with no backup from higher courts. It's constitutional jujitsu, using the structure of the legal system to avoid accountability, and it all works because impeachment, the constitutional check on executive lawlessness, is politically dead. Republicans proved that in 2019 and 2021, and they're proving it now in 2025 by refusing to even hold hearings on the articles Democrats have introduced. Representative Al Green vowed to force a vote on his article of impeachment against Trump, saying on the House floor, "The movement to impeach the president has begun." But Democratic Representative Jamie Raskin acknowledged the political reality, saying right now it's 218 to 215, so if you can find me 2 Republicans, I'll go to work tomorrow. 2 Republicans, that's all it would take to move forward with impeachment, but they can't find 2. Not after Trump defied 1/3 of court orders, not after he systematically refused to comply with judicial authority, not after he usurped congressional appropriations power, because Trump has remade the Republican Party in his image. Anyone who crosses him gets primaried, attacked, driven out. The 10 Republicans who voted to impeach him in 2021, most are gone from Congress. Liz Cheney, defeated. Adam Kinzinger, retired. The message is clear: protect Trump or lose your seat. So impeachment, the Constitution's ultimate check on presidential abuse, has become a dead letter, not because Trump hasn't committed impeachable offenses, he clearly has, but because one party has decided party loyalty matters more than constitutional duty, and Trump knows it. Every time he defies a court order and nothing happens, he learns the lesson again: there are no consequences. The impeachment clause doesn't apply to him anymore. That's the pattern, that's the strategy, and that's why we're in a constitutional crisis, whether we want to admit it or not. The framers gave us 2 main ways to stop a lawless president. First, Congress can impeach and remove him. Second, courts can block his illegal actions and hold him in contempt if he doesn't comply. These 2 mechanisms are supposed to work together to protect constitutional government. But what happens when one party controls Congress and refuses to impeach no matter what, and the president systematically defies court orders? Legal scholar Dan Ehrman from Northeastern University explains, our entire system is based on the parties to a lawsuit complying with judicial orders. Trump administration actions like this will embolden judges up to and including Supreme Court justices to possibly issue civil and criminal contempt orders. This ratchets up the constitutional crisis, since the U.S. Marshals or the Department of Justice must enforce contempt orders. Both institutions exist within the executive branch, which allegedly defied the judicial branch. Read that carefully. The enforcement arm of the judiciary, the people who execute court orders, work for the president. If the president tells them not to enforce orders against his own administration, we have a crisis. The courts have no army, they have no police force, they rely on the executive branch to enforce their rulings. This is what Alexander Hamilton called in Federalist 78, the least dangerous branch. The judiciary has neither force nor will, but merely judgment. Courts depend on the other branches, especially the executive, to respect and enforce their judgments. But what if the executive refuses?